On April 12, 1945, deep within the crumbling heart of Berlin, General Klaus Reinhardt sat alone in the dimly lit confines of his final command bunker. The city above was a wasteland of smoke and ruin, its streets echoing with the distant thunder of artillery and the cries of a defeated people. The Nazi regime was on its last breath, and Reinhardt, once a stalwart of the Wehrmacht, now found himself grappling with a reality far more devastating than the physical destruction surrounding him. Clutched in his hands was his private journal, a reluctant confidant to the storm of doubts swirling in his mind. The general's pen hovered over the parchment, hesitating before he began to write, his thoughts fragmented yet piercingly clear. He reflected on the years of propaganda that had clouded his judgment, the relentless assurances of German superiority, the denigration of Allied forces as inferior and technologically backward. Yet now, as the war's final act unfolded, the truth was undeniable. Reports had reached him of American advances that shattered every preconception he had held. Radar systems that could detect aircraft miles away, jet engines propelling planes at unheard speeds, and most terrifying of all, the atomic bomb, a weapon of unimaginable power that had rewritten the rules of warfare and human survival. Reinhardt recalled the initial disbelief that had gripped him upon hearing these reports. How could a nation so long underestimated by his superiors and peers have harnessed such cutting-edge technology? The Nazi narrative, which glorified brute strength and traditional military might, seemed suddenly archaic in the face of this innovation. It was as if the very foundation of his world had cracked beneath him, leaving only a void filled with uncertainty and fear. In the quiet moments between the chaos, Reinhardt's journal became a sanctuary for his unraveling thoughts. He wrote of the shock that rippled through the command ranks as news of American technological prowess filtered down. Senior officers, once confident in the invincibility of their forces, now whispered in hushed tones of radar-guided bombers, mechanized infantry units supported by unprecedented logistical networks, and the terrifying potential of nuclear weapons. The specter of these innovations was a psychological blow more devastating than any battlefield defeat. As the days passed, Reinhardt's reflections grew darker. He documented the growing realization that the war was not being lost solely due to strategic miscalculations or overwhelming numbers. Instead, it was the relentless pace of American innovation that had tilted the balance irreversibly. The enemy was not just advancing on the ground, but had leapt forward in scientific and technological realms, leaving Germany's military doctrine struggling to keep pace. The bunker's oppressive silence was broken only by the distant rumble of destruction and the crackle of intercepted communications confirming the collapse of German defenses. Reinhardt's mind churned with the implications. The atomic bomb's detonation had not only devastated Japanese cities, but also signaled a new era in warfare, one in which technological supremacy would dictate survival. The general pondered the irony that Nazi Germany, which had invested heavily in ideological fanaticism and traditional warfare, had failed to prioritize the very innovation that now ensured its defeat. Despite the despair, Reinhardt's entries revealed a flicker of reluctant admiration. He acknowledged the strategic brilliance of the United States in mobilizing its vast industrial and scientific resources. The integration of research and development into military planning was a lesson he could not ignore, even as it underscored his own failures. He mused on how this innovation extended beyond weapons to encompass logistics, communication, and production methods that had overwhelmed the Wehrmacht's capacity to respond effectively. In the solitude of his final hours before the inevitable fall of Berlin, Reinhardt contemplated the psychological toll of these revelations. The myth of German invincibility, carefully cultivated through years of propaganda and battlefield successes, lay in ruins alongside the city above. He questioned how so many had been blinded to the importance of innovation, how ideology had stifled critical thinking and adaptation. His journal became a testament not just to defeat, but to the profound transformation in understanding that accompanied it. The general's thoughts drifted to the soldiers under his command, many of whom clung to the old certainties even as the world shifted beneath their feet. Reinhardt feared the consequences of this denial, recognizing that without embracing change, Germany's future would be mired in the same failures that had doomed the Reich. He felt a growing urgency to document these insights, to ensure that the lessons of innovation, and the catastrophic cost of ignoring it, would not be lost in the ashes. As night deepened over the shattered city, Reinhardt's pen moved steadily across the pages, capturing the final moments of a world he had known, and the dawning of one shaped by relentless technological progress. His reflections were tinged with a somber resolve, an acknowledgement that the war's outcome was sealed not merely by battles won or lost, but by the unyielding march of American ingenuity. In those confined quarters, beneath layers of concrete and steel, General Klaus Reinhardt bore witness to the end of an era. His private journal stood as a silent chronicle of disbelief, recognition, and the painful birth of a new understanding that Nazi Germany's defeat was as much an intellectual and technological failure as a military one. The innovations unleashed by the United States had not only changed the course of the war, but had irrevocably altered the very nature of power and survival in the modern world. The general's last written words before the bunker's final silence encapsulated this profound shift, a reluctant admission that the tide had turned not on the battlefield alone, but in the laboratories, factories, and minds of those who dared to innovate. As Berlin burned and the Reich crumbled, the reality crystallized: Germany's fate was sealed not by lack of courage, but by the failure to embrace the future that innovation demanded. In the days following the fall of Berlin, from April 15 to May 1, 1945, General Klaus Reinhardt found himself navigating a landscape of collapse and chaos, both physical and mental. The once impenetrable fortress of Nazi Germany was unraveling rapidly, and with it, the hardened convictions of its military leaders. Reinhardt, now a shadow of the commanding officer he had been, moved cautiously through the fragmented remnants of his shattered command, his journal ever at hand to capture his evolving thoughts. As the city's defenses crumbled and the Red Army pressed inexorably westward, Reinhardt's interactions with fellow officers revealed an unexpected unanimity, a grudging acknowledgement of the United States' technological and strategic superiority. These men, hardened by years of conflict and steeped in the doctrines of blitzkrieg and mechanized warfare, now spoke in tones tinged with disbelief and reluctant respect. The tales they shared of American innovations, radar-guided artillery, jet aircraft capable of outrunning any German fighter, and mechanized infantry supported by unprecedented logistical networks, began to coalesce into a narrative that challenged the very foundations of their training. Reinhardt's journal chronicled these conversations with a mix of fascination and despair. He noted how officers who had once dismissed Allied capabilities as inferior now debated the implications of synthetic materials that replaced scarce natural resources, enabling the mass production of equipment at an astonishing scale. Reports described how American forces deployed mechanized units with a speed and coordination that defied traditional German tactics, combining mobility, communication, and firepower in a manner previously unimagined. The general reflected on a particularly stark moment during a meeting with his staff, where the discussion turned to the role of innovation in the broader failure of the German war effort. The officers conceded that Nazi Germany's rigid adherence to ideology and conventional military doctrine had blinded them to the transformative power of technology. While German forces had relied heavily on valor and experience, the Americans had leveraged research and development as a force multiplier, integrating new inventions seamlessly into their operational strategies. These revelations unsettled Reinhardt deeply. He wrote of the psychological upheaval gripping the command echelons, a growing awareness that defeat was not solely a matter of numbers or morale, but stemmed from a fundamental inability to adapt. The Nazi leadership, he observed, had underestimated the speed and scope of American innovation, leading to strategic decisions that were rendered obsolete before they could take effect. Throughout these final weeks, Reinhardt witnessed firsthand the consequences of this technological gap. As artillery barrages and air raids intensified, he saw German units falter against American mechanized forces equipped with superior communication devices and night fighting capabilities. The once feared Wehrmacht was being outmaneuvered and outgunned, its soldiers overwhelmed by an enemy who fought not just with weapons but with ingenuity. In his journal, Reinhardt detailed moments of tactical meetings where commanders expressed frustration at the inability to counter American synthetic fuels and mass-produced vehicles, which kept their forces mobile and well-supplied even as Germany's infrastructure collapsed. The contrast was stark. Where German factories sputtered under Allied bombing and resource shortages, American assembly lines churned relentlessly, producing equipment that far exceeded German output. Reinhardt also noted the psychological impact on his men. The younger officers, in particular, began to question the wisdom of their superiors and the ideology that had steered the nation into ruin. The realization that they were facing an adversary who had mastered the art of innovation sparked a quiet, but profound crisis of confidence. Some whispered of the futility of resistance, while others grappled with the bitter truth that their sacrifices had been in vain against a foe whose advantage lay beyond traditional battlefield valor. Amid this growing disillusionment, Reinhardt's reflections took on a more philosophical tone. He pondered how the Nazi regime's failure to embrace scientific progress and technological adaptation had sealed its fate. The regime's obsession with ideological purity had stifled creativity and discouraged the kind of collaborative innovation that the Allies had fostered. Reinhardt lamented that while Germany possessed brilliant minds, the political climate had prevented their full mobilization toward the war effort. The general's writings from this period revealed an increasing respect for the American approach to warfare, one that integrated technology with strategy and logistics. He recognized that the Allied emphasis on research and development was not merely a wartime expedient, but a foundational shift in how nations prepared for and conducted conflict. This recognition was accompanied by a painful admission that Nazi Germany's military doctrine, rooted in past glories and rigid hierarchies, was ill-equipped for the demands of modern warfare. Reinhardt's journal entries also captured the erosion of morale among the German forces. The soldiers' encounters with American weaponry and tactics left them demoralized and bewildered. Tales circulated of American units striking with precision under the cover of darkness, supported by communications technology that kept them coordinated across vast distances. The Wehrmacht, once the embodiment of disciplined efficiency, was being reduced to a patchwork of isolated units struggling to respond to a foe who wielded innovation as a decisive weapon. As May 1st approached, Reinhardt's thoughts turned increasingly toward the implications of this technological imbalance for Germany's future. He foresaw that any post-war reconstruction would require a radical rethinking of military strategy and industrial policy. The lessons of these final days were clear: victory would no longer belong to those who fought hardest on the battlefield, but to those who could innovate fastest and adapt quickest. The general's writings from this time carried a tone of resigned clarity. He acknowledged that the war's outcome was shaped not only by the clash of armies, but by the collision of ideas and technologies. The American ability to harness science and industry had rendered obsolete the doctrines that had once made Germany a formidable power. Reinhardt's journal became a record of this painful epiphany, a candid admission that the failure to prioritize innovation had been a critical factor in the Reich's downfall. In the bunker's shadowed rooms and amidst the ruins of Berlin, conversations among officers increasingly centered on the need to learn from the American example. Reinhardt recorded discussions about the importance of synthetic materials, the integration of mechanized infantry with air support, and the critical role of communications technology in modern combat. These debates, tinged with both regret and hope, hinted at the possibility of a future German military that might embrace the lessons of defeat. Yet even as these ideas took root, the immediate reality was grim. The Nazi command structure was disintegrating, and with it, the old certainties that had guided generations of German officers. Reinhardt sensed that the era of traditional warfare was fading, replaced by a new paradigm defined by technological innovation and strategic flexibility. The general's journal stood as a testament to this transition, a chronicle of a military elite forced to confront the obsolescence of its doctrines in the face of a rapidly changing world. Through these final weeks, Reinhardt's reflections revealed a man caught between loyalty to his country and the dawning awareness of its failures. His private writings expose the psychological toll of recognizing that the enemy's superiority was not just in numbers or firepower, but in the very way they conceived and executed war. The American model of integrating innovation with strategy had not only won the conflict, but had reshaped the future of military thought. As May approached, General Klaus Reinhardt's journal closed on a sobering note. The collapse of German defenses was no longer a matter of if, but when. The narrative of American innovation had become the defining story of the war's final chapter, one that would echo long after the guns fell silent. Reinhardt's candid admissions and the debates among his peers marked the beginning of a reckoning with the past, and a tentative step toward the future defined by the relentless advance of technology and the imperative to adapt. On the morning of May 2, 1945, As the sun cast a pale light over the shattered outskirts of Berlin, General Klaus Reinhardt found himself surrounded not by the loyal soldiers he once commanded, but by the stern faces of advancing U.S. troops. The city, long a symbol of Nazi ambition and defiance, had fallen, and with it, the last vestiges of German military resistance. Reinhardt's capture was swift, a quiet coda to a conflict that had consumed nations and reshaped the world. As he was escorted from the ruins, the general's eyes absorbed the stark contrast between the battered German equipment and the gleaming machines operated by the Americans. Tanks with sleek lines and powerful engines rumbled past, their crews communicating with radios that crackled clearly over the din of war. Reinhardt's mind churned with the realization that this was not merely a difference in resources, but a profound gap in technological innovation that had dictated the outcome of the conflict. The first moments of captivity brought Reinhardt face to face with the tangible proof of American military superiority. He observed mechanized tanks that moved with surprising agility, their design reflecting years of research and development aimed at maximizing efficiency and firepower. Communication devices allowed for coordination across distances that German units struggled to manage, turning the battlefield into a network theater of rapid response and strategic precision. Supply chains operated with a reliability that defied the chaos that had engulfed the German forces. Reinhardt's journal, now a repository of his evolving understanding, recorded these observations with a mixture of awe and bitter acceptance. He wrote of the psychological impact that witnessing American innovation firsthand had on his conception of the war. The disparity between the worn, often improvised German equipment and the cutting-edge machinery of their captors was stark, a living metaphor for the broader failure that had sealed Germany's fate. The general reflected on the hours spent in transit, surrounded by soldiers who bore the weight of defeat, but also the flicker of hope that came with survival. The American forces treated their prisoners with a professionalism that underscored the contrast between the two armies. Reinhardt noted the efficiency with which the U.S. Army processed thousands of captives daily, a testament to the logistical prowess that had sustained their advance. During this time, Reinhardt was struck by the discipline and organization that underpinned the American military machine. The use of mechanized transport, communication arrays, and well-coordinated supply lines revealed a strategic depth that had outmatched the German emphasis on battlefield valor and rigid command structures. The general's reflections conveyed a growing conviction that the war's outcome was not merely a matter of tactics or bravery but rooted deeply in the technological and organizational superiority of the Allies. As the days passed, Reinhardt's exposure to American military technology deepened. He witnessed the deployment of mechanized infantry units supported by mobile artillery, a synergy that overwhelmed German defensive positions. The American ability to integrate technology into every facet of warfare, from reconnaissance to supply, was a revelation that challenged his previous assumptions about military effectiveness. The contrast extended beyond hardware to encompass the very philosophy of warfare. Reinhardt recognized that American military doctrine embraced innovation as a cornerstone, continuously adapting to new technologies and battlefield realities. This flexibility had allowed them to capitalize on their scientific and industrial advantages, maintaining momentum even as the war's scale expanded. In his journal, Reinhardt described moments of introspection, questioning the rigid doctrines that had guided the Wehrmacht. He acknowledged that German forces had often been hampered by outdated tactics and an unwillingness to deviate from established methods. The emphasis on honor and tradition, while fostering courage, had sometimes blinded commanders to the transformative potential of innovation. Reinhardt's reflections also touched on the human dimension of this technological divide. He observed how the morale of German troops suffered not only from material shortages, but from the realization that they were facing an enemy equipped with superior tools and strategies. The psychological blow of encountering American mechanized units, coordinated by advanced communications and supported by relentless logistics, was profound. During captivity, Reinhardt was granted limited access to American officers and engineers, whose discussions illuminated the strategic prioritization of research and development. He learned of the extensive programs that had fueled advancements in radar, jet propulsion, and atomic energy, each a critical factor in the Allied victory. These conversations deepened his understanding of how innovation had been woven into the fabric of American military planning. The general's writings revealed a growing respect for the strategic vision behind America's technological edge. He acknowledged that the integration of scientific expertise with industrial capacity had created a war machine capable of rapid adaptation and overwhelming force. This realization contrasted sharply with the German experience, where ideological rigidity and resource constraints had stifled progress. Reinhardt's journal became a chronicle of transformation, capturing the moment when a seasoned commander confronted the full implications of technological inferiority. The worn equipment he had once commanded, the tactics he had relied upon, now seemed relics in the face of American innovation. This recognition was not merely professional but deeply personal, marking a profound shift in his worldview. As he awaited further processing at the prisoner camp, Reinhardt's thoughts turned to the broader consequences of this technological gap. He foresaw that Germany's defeat was not simply the end of a military campaign, but a lesson in the necessity of embracing innovation for national survival. The war had demonstrated that future conflicts would be shaped less by numbers or valor, and more by the capacity to harness and integrate new technologies. In these reflections, Reinhardt wrestled with the legacy of his own role in the conflict. His journal entries conveyed a mixture of regret and resolve, acknowledging the failures of the past while contemplating the path forward. He recognized that the lessons learned in captivity, of American innovation and strategic adaptability, could serve as a foundation for rebuilding a future Germany. The general's exposure to American military technology and organizational prowess during these early days of captivity was a crucible of change. It shattered illusions and opened his eyes to the realities that had dictated the course of the war. Reinhardt's journal stood as a testament to this awakening, documenting the passage from denial to acceptance, from defeat to the possibility of renewal grounded in innovation. In the stillness of the prisoner camp, amidst the echoes of a collapsing world order, General Klaus Reinhardt began to understand that the true measure of power in modern warfare lay not just in men and weapons, but in the relentless march of technology and the vision to wield it effectively. This realization would mark the beginning of a profound transformation, both personal and national, as the old world gave way to the new realities forged in the crucible of conflict. In the weeks that followed his capture, from May through August of 1945, General Klaus Reinhardt found himself confined within the boundaries of a United States military camp in Bavaria. The stark contrast between the devastation he had witnessed in Berlin and the orderly efficiency of his captor's operations was a constant reminder of the profound shift in power he had come to accept. In this new environment, Reinhardt's private journal became both a refuge and a crucible, capturing the evolution of his thoughts as he grappled with the implications of innovation on the war's outcome. The general's days were marked by interactions with American officers and engineers, whose openness to dialogue contrasted sharply with the rigid hierarchy he had known. These encounters offered Reinhardt glimpses into the strategic emphasis the United States placed on research and development. He learned of the vast networks of scientific minds, industrial capacity, and military planners working in concert to maintain a relentless pace of innovation. The Manhattan Project, radar advancements, synthetic materials, these were not mere footnotes but central pillars supporting the Allied victory. Reinhardt's journal entries during this period revealed a growing recognition that Nazi Germany's failure was not merely a consequence of battlefield losses, but a systemic shortcoming in prioritizing innovation. He reflected on how the regime's ideological obsessions had diverted attention and resources away from the scientific and technological advancements necessary for sustained military success. This failure, he concluded, had left Germany vulnerable to an enemy whose strength lay as much in laboratories and factories as on the front lines. Amid the camp's routine, Reinhardt engaged in candid conversations that challenged his previous assumptions. American officers spoke of the integration of science into military strategy as a dynamic and ongoing process, one that required adaptability and an openness to change. Reinhardt began to question the sustainability of the doctrines he had once upheld, doctrines that emphasized brute force and tradition over innovation and flexibility. The general's reflections were tinged with a mixture of regret and enlightenment. He acknowledged that his prior loyalty to Nazi ideology had blinded him to the necessity of embracing new technologies and methods. This admission was not easy. It represented a profound ideological shift that unsettled the foundations of his identity as a soldier and a leader. Yet, through his journal, Reinhardt sought to reconcile his past with the emerging realities of modern warfare. Reinhardt also observed the manner in which American camps functioned as more than mere detention centers. Educational programs introduced prisoners to the scientific achievements underpinning the Allied war effort. Lectures on the Manhattan Project, mass production techniques, and the role of synthetic materials became part of a broader initiative to expose captives to the forces that had shaped their defeat. For Reinhardt, these programs were revelatory, providing context and understanding that extended beyond the battlefield. His writings detailed how these educational efforts began to reshape his perspective on leadership and military strategy. The exposure to American industrial mobilization impressed upon him the importance of integrating innovation not as a peripheral concern, but as a central component of national defense. He noted the contrast between American pragmatism and the ideological rigidity that had hampered German advancements. Interactions with fellow German officers undergoing similar re-education fostered a collective reassessment of past beliefs. Reinhardt's journal captured moments of debate and reflection, where the failures of Nazi military doctrine were scrutinized with newfound honesty. The recognition that innovation had been the decisive factor in the war's outcome gradually crystallized into a shared understanding among these former adversaries. Throughout this period, Reinhardt's introspection deepened. He contemplated the broader implications of technological progress on future conflicts and national security. His writings suggested an emerging conviction that any hope for Germany's reconstruction and renewal would hinge upon embracing the principles of innovation and adaptability exemplified by the United States. This ideological shift represented a departure from the past and an opening toward a different future. Reinhardt also documented the psychological transformation taking place within himself and his peers. The initial shock of defeat gave way to a sober acceptance of the lessons imparted by their captors. The realization that America had not only outproduced, but outthought Nazi Germany was a humbling truth that demanded reconsideration of long-held assumptions about power and warfare. As the summer months waned, the general's journal entries reflected a maturation of thought. He began to advocate, if tentatively, for a future Germany that would prioritize technological progress and democratic principles over the dogmas that had led to ruin. His reflections hinted at a growing belief that the lessons learned in captivity could serve as a foundation for rebuilding a nation capable of standing anew in a rapidly changing world. Reinhardt's transformation was neither swift nor complete, but it was profound. His journal, once a private record of disbelief and despair, now charted a course toward understanding and perhaps redemption. The camp in Bavaria, with its blend of confinement and education, became an unlikely crucible for this evolution, a place where the defeated could confront the realities of their failure and begin to imagine a new path forward. Throughout these months, Reinhardt remained keenly aware of the symbolic power of innovation in shaping not only the outcome of war but the destiny of nations. His writings underscored the necessity of integrating scientific discovery with strategic vision, a lesson that he believed future German leaders must heed if they were to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. In the quiet hours of captivity, amidst the routine of camp life and the echoes of a global conflict drawing to a close, General Klaus Reinhardt's journal bore witness to a transformation of mind and spirit. It captured the painful but essential reckoning with a past defined by failure to innovate and the tentative embrace of a future illuminated by the promise of technological progress and democratic renewal. Between September and December of 1945, General Klaus Reinhardt's captivity in the United States evolved from mere confinement into an unexpected journey of education and revelation. The military camp in Bavaria, once a place of isolation, now served as a hub where former adversaries encountered the very foundations of American technological and industrial might that had sealed the fate of Nazi Germany. Reinhardt's journal, meticulously maintained, chronicled this profound transformation as he immersed himself in programs designed to illuminate the scientific achievements and mass production techniques that underpinned the Allied victory. The educational initiatives introduced to the prisoners were unlike any Reinhardt had anticipated. Lectures and discussions ranged from the intricacies of the Manhattan Project, America's atomic weapon development, to the revolutionary advances in synthetic materials and assembly line manufacturing. These sessions dismantled the simplistic notions of warfare Reinhardt had once held, revealing a vast, interconnected system where science, industry, and strategy converged to create an unstoppable force. Reinhardt was particularly struck by the revelations surrounding the Manhattan Project. Detailed explanations of how physicists and engineers had harnessed nuclear fission to produce a weapon of unprecedented destructive power challenged his understanding of warfare's scope. The project's scale and secrecy demonstrated the United States' capacity to mobilize intellectual resources alongside industrial might, a synthesis that had decisively altered the global balance. Beyond the atomic bomb, Reinhardt studied the methods by which American industry achieved mass production at an astonishing scale. He learned how assembly lines, optimized through scientific management and innovative techniques, churned out tanks, aircraft, and munitions in volumes that overwhelmed the Axis powers. The integration of synthetic materials, which compensated for resource shortages, further exemplified the adaptability and ingenuity driving the Allied war machine. These lessons extended beyond hardware to encompass broader concepts of industrial mobilization and economic strategy. Reinhardt's journal captured his growing appreciation for the foresight and planning that had enabled the United States to sustain war production while maintaining civilian economic stability. This balance contrasted sharply with the resource-drained and bombed-out economy of Germany, which had struggled under the weight of prolonged conflict. The general's reflections revealed a shift in his perspective on leadership and military strategy. He recognized that victory in modern warfare demanded more than battlefield valor. It required a holistic approach integrating innovation, production, and logistics. This realization challenged the doctrines he had once embraced, doctrines rooted in traditional hierarchy and battlefield tactics that had failed to anticipate the transformative impact of technology. Reinhardt's interactions with American educators and fellow prisoners fostered an environment of critical inquiry. Discussions often centered on the failures of Nazi Germany to harness scientific expertise effectively and the consequences of ideological rigidity that suppressed innovation. He noted that many officers, once resistant to such ideas, now actively engaged in debates about how Germany might rebuild with an emphasis on technological progress and strategic flexibility. These educational programs also exposed Reinhardt to the democratic principles intertwined with American innovation. He observed that the openness and collaboration fueling scientific breakthroughs were reflections of wider societal values that contrasted with the authoritarian structures he had served. This connection between political freedom and technological advancement planted seeds of ideological reconsideration within him. Throughout these months, Reinhardt's journal documented both intellectual and emotional shifts. He grappled with the dissonance between his past allegiances and the undeniable successes of the American model. There was a growing acknowledgement that Germany's defeat had been rooted not only in military failures, but in a broader failure to adapt to the realities of modern industrialized warfare. The general also recorded moments of personal humility as he confronted the scale and scope of American achievement. The sheer volume of production, the speed of technological development, and the strategic integration of these elements left him with a deep respect for the systemic approach that had overwhelmed the Wehrmacht. This respect was tempered by a sober awareness of the consequences of Germany's previous neglect of innovation. As the year drew to a close, Reinhardt's reflections turned toward the future. He began to contemplate how the lessons learned from these educational experiences could inform Germany's post-war reconstruction. His journal entries suggested a tentative hope that the integration of technology, industry, and democratic principles might offer a path toward renewal, a stark departure from the past. Reinhardt's evolving thoughts also reflected a broader transformation among his fellow officers. The exposure to American scientific achievements and industrial practices fostered a collective reassessment of Germany's military and economic strategies. These discussions hinted at an emerging consensus on the necessity of embracing innovation and flexibility as cornerstones of any future defense policy. In the quiet moments of captivity, Reinhardt's journal became a vessel for this intellectual awakening. He recorded not only factual accounts of the programs he attended, but also his internal struggles and growing convictions. The contrast between the technological dynamism he witnessed and the stagnation of Nazi Germany's approach underscored the urgency of change. Reinhardt's writings from this period also touched on the human dimension of innovation. He reflected on how scientific progress was inseparable from the values of openness, collaboration, and critical inquiry. These principles, he realized, were essential not only for technological advancement, but for the health of a society capable of sustaining such progress. The general's evolving understanding extended to the strategic implications of innovation. He recognized that future conflicts would be decided not merely by armies on the field, but by nations' abilities to integrate research, production, and logistics into cohesive strategies. This insight marked a profound departure from the doctrines that had dominated his military career. Through these months, Reinhardt's journal captured a man in transition, one moving from the rigidity of past beliefs toward a nuanced appreciation of the interplay between technology, strategy, and society. His reflections embodied the painful but necessary process of confronting defeat and envisioning a future shaped by lessons hard won. As 1945 ended, General Klaus Reinhardt stood at a crossroads. His captivity had transformed from a period of confinement into an education in the forces that had reshaped the world. His journal bore witness to this journey, charting a path from denial to understanding, from ideological certainty to the embrace of innovation and democratic principles as the pillars of a new era. In the cold dawn of January 1946, General Klaus Reinhardt sat at a simple wooden desk within his quarters at the U.S. military camp in Bavaria, pen poised over the pages of his journal. The months of captivity and education had culminated in a moment of profound clarity, and now, as winter deepened, he was compelled to commit his last words to paper. These reflections were not mere observations, but a candid admission that the fate of Nazi Germany had been irrevocably sealed by its failure to innovate and adapt in the face of overwhelming American technological superiority. Reinhardt's writing was marked by a tone of sober acceptance. He acknowledged that the traditional metrics of valor, discipline, and battlefield tactics, while important, were ultimately insufficient against an adversary whose strength lay in the relentless pursuit of innovation. The American military had harnessed scientific research, industrial mobilization, and strategic flexibility in a manner that rendered German efforts obsolete. This convergence of technology and strategy had determined the war's outcome more decisively than any single battle or campaign. He reflected on the ideological blindness that had permeated the Nazi command structure, which had prioritized dogma over pragmatism. The regime's failure to foster a culture of innovation, and its suppression of intellectual freedom, had stifled the very creativity and adaptability necessary for modern warfare. Reinhardt conceded that this systemic failure overshadowed even the battlefield valor of German soldiers, highlighting a critical flaw that had led to defeat. In his journal, Reinhardt also confronted the personal implications of these realizations. He grappled with the dissonance between his loyalty to Germany and the undeniable truth that the country's defeat was rooted in strategic and technological shortcomings. His writing revealed a man wrestling with the erosion of long-held beliefs, yet striving to extract lessons that could guide a future Germany toward renewal. The general's last words were not only an admission of failure but a call for transformation. He advocated for a post-war Germany that would embrace technological progress and democratic principles as foundations for rebuilding. Reinhardt envisioned a nation that would learn from its past mistakes, fostering innovation as a national imperative and integrating scientific advancement with political freedom. This ideological shift was significant, marking a departure from the authoritarian and militaristic doctrines that had dominated his earlier career. Reinhardt's reflections suggested a growing recognition that the survival and prosperity of any nation in the modern world depended on its capacity to adapt and innovate continuously. He urged his compatriots to shed the remnants of ideological rigidity and embrace a future defined by openness and progress. Reinhardt's candid admissions resonated beyond his private journal. His writings circulated discreetly among former officers and military thinkers, sparking intense debate about the lessons to be drawn from the war. These discussions signaled the beginning of a broader reckoning within the German military establishment, challenging traditional doctrines and advocating for reforms grounded in technological modernization. Within the camp, Reinhardt engaged in dialogues that further deepened his convictions. Conversations with American officers and fellow German prisoners revealed shared understandings of how innovation had shaped the war's outcome and how it must shape the future. These exchanges reinforced his belief that the integration of scientific research and democratic governance was essential for Germany's reconstruction. The general's reflections also touched on the moral dimensions of defeat. He acknowledged that beyond technology and strategy, the war had exposed profound ethical failures within the Nazi regime. Reinhardt's writings suggested that any genuine renewal would require confronting these moral lessons, alongside embracing technological and political reforms. As winter gave way to spring, Reinhardt's journal became a manifesto of sorts, a blueprint for transformation rooted in the hard-won insights of captivity. He articulated a vision of Germany not as a militaristic power clinging to past glories, but as a modern nation committed to innovation, democracy, and peaceful coexistence. This vision, while tentative, embodied hope and a determination to learn from history. Throughout these months, Reinhardt's personal journey mirrored the broader shifts occurring within German society and the military. His last words encapsulated the painful process of acknowledging defeat, understanding its causes, and charting a course toward renewal. The general's reflections stood as a testament to the power of critical self-examination and the imperative of embracing change. Reinhardt's writings also revealed an awareness of the geopolitical realities shaping post-war Europe. He recognized that Germany's future would be intertwined with the emerging Cold War dynamics and the need for cooperation with former adversaries. His advocacy for technological progress and democratic principles aligned with the broader efforts to integrate Germany into a new international order based on mutual security and shared values. Despite the weight of these realizations, Reinhardt's tone conveyed a cautious optimism. He believed that the lessons of innovation and adaptation, if embraced sincerely, could transform Germany from a defeated nation into a contributor to global stability and progress. His last words were both an acknowledgement of the past and a call to action for the future. The general's reflections did not go unnoticed. Among former officers and policymakers, his admissions sparked debates that would influence the reshaping of Germany's military doctrine and industrial policies in the ensuing years. Reinhardt's experience became emblematic of the necessity to reconcile with defeat, learn from it, and build anew. Within the confines of the camp, as spring blossomed beyond the barbed wire fences, General Klaus Reinhardt's journal closed one chapter of history and opened another. His last words crystallized the profound truth that innovation, more than valor or ideology, had determined the fate of nations in the modern era. This realization, born of captivity and reflection, would echo through the post-war years, shaping the destiny of Germany and the wider world. In the months spanning April to December 1946, General Klaus Reinhardt's role shifted from that of a captive reflecting on defeat to an active participant in the complex process of Germany's post-war reconstruction. Facilitated by American authorities, Reinhardt was entrusted with responsibilities that extended beyond mere survival. He became a conduit for dialogue between former adversaries, engaging in discussions on rebuilding Germany's military and industrial capabilities with a clear emphasis on innovation. Reinhardt's journal during this period details his frequent meetings with U.S. scientists, military strategists, and industrial experts, each encounter deepening his understanding of how wartime technological advances could be adapted for peacetime applications. He observed firsthand the meticulous planning and organization that underpinned America's transition from war production to civilian industry, a process he deemed essential for Germany's recovery. These interactions illuminated the critical role that research and development would play in shaping the future German economy and defense posture. Reinhardt was particularly impressed by the American model's integration of scientific expertise with industrial capacity, which allowed for rapid innovation and efficient production. This approach contrasted sharply with the fragmented and ideologically driven systems that had hampered Germany's wartime efforts. In his reflections, Reinhardt emphasized the importance of adopting a similar framework in Germany, one that prioritized technological progress, flexibility, and collaboration across sectors. He advocated for establishing institutions that could foster continuous innovation, drawing upon the lessons learned from American industrial mobilization. His writings suggested that such efforts would not only rebuild Germany's military strength, but also drive economic revitalization. Reinhardt actively engaged in shaping proposals for military restructuring that balanced the necessity of defense with the imperatives of democratic oversight and international cooperation. He recognized that any future German military would need to be fundamentally different from its predecessor, more technologically advanced, strategically adaptive, and aligned with the principles of a peaceful, democratic society. Throughout this period, Reinhardt's journal captured the complexities and challenges of these transformative efforts. He documented the tensions between traditional military leaders resistant to change and a new generation eager to embrace innovation and reform. The general positioned himself as a mediator, seeking to bridge these divides by emphasizing the pragmatic need to learn from defeat and the American example. Reinhardt's reflections also reveal his growing appreciation for the role of science and technology in diplomacy and international relations. He understood that Germany's future security would depend not only on military capability, but on its ability to participate in broader scientific collaborations and alliances. His writings underscored the necessity of rebuilding trust with former adversaries through transparency and shared commitment to progress. In the industrial sphere, Reinhardt observed ambitious efforts to reconstruct factories and research centers devastated by the war. He noted how American assistance and expertise facilitated the adoption of advanced manufacturing techniques, including automation and quality control processes that had been pivotal in Allied production. These developments, he argued, would position Germany to compete in the emerging global economy while supporting its defense needs. The general's journal entries from this time also reflect a nuanced understanding of the social dimensions of Reconstruction. He acknowledged that technological advancement could not be divorced from political and cultural renewal. Reinhardt advocated for educational reforms to cultivate a new generation of engineers, scientists, and military leaders attuned to democratic values and innovation. Reinhardt's personal transformation was mirrored in his growing involvement with policymakers and intellectuals shaping West Germany's emerging identity. His candid reflections and pragmatic approach earned him respect among American officials and German reformers alike. Through his writings, he became a voice advocating for a Germany rebuilt on the principles of progress, cooperation, and responsible governance. Despite the optimism that permeated much of his journal, Reinhardt did not shy away from acknowledging the formidable obstacles ahead. He documented the lingering scars of war, economic hardship, political fragmentation, and societal distrust that threatened to undermine Reconstruction efforts. Yet, his writings conveyed a firm belief that embracing innovation and democratic principles offered the best path forward. In private moments, Reinhardt reflected on the symbolic weight of his own journey, from a defeated commander to a proponent of renewal. He saw his transformation as emblematic of Germany's broader struggle to reconcile with its past and forge a new future. His journal became a testament to the power of adaptation and the enduring potential of human ingenuity. As 1946 drew to a close, Reinhardt's role continued to evolve. He found himself increasingly involved in shaping military doctrine, industrial policy, and educational initiatives that would define West Germany's post-war trajectory. His advocacy for integrating American technological methods into German Reconstruction efforts signaled a decisive break with the past and a commitment to a future grounded in innovation and democratic values. Throughout these months, Reinhardt's writings underscored the interconnectedness of technology, strategy, and politics. He argued that sustainable security required not only advanced weaponry, but an informed and adaptable society capable of supporting continuous progress. This holistic vision reflected the lessons hard-won through defeat and captivity. General Klaus Reinhardt's journal from this period captures a pivotal chapter in Germany's post-war history, a time when defeat gave way to renewal through the embrace of innovation, cooperation, and democratic principles. His reflections and actions embodied the transformative spirit that would shape West Germany's emergence as a resilient, forward-looking nation in the early years of the Cold War. In the years following 1946, General Klaus Reinhardt's reflections and experiences transcended the confines of captivity and Reconstruction, becoming influential touchstones in the shaping of West Germany's military doctrine and industrial policies amid the rising tensions of the Cold War. His journey, from a defeated commander to an advocate for innovation and democratic principles, embodied a transformation that resonated deeply within a nation striving to redefine its identity and role on the global stage. Reinhardt's memoirs, painstakingly compiled and circulated among military and political circles, offered candid insights into the decisive role that U.S. technological advancement had played in the downfall of Nazi Germany. These writings struck a chord with policymakers tasked with rebuilding a military force that would neither repeat past mistakes nor provoke old fears. His acknowledgement of technological inferiority as a critical factor in defeat underscored the imperative to prioritize research, development, and modernization in the new Bundeswehr. The general's advocacy extended beyond mere military hardware. He championed a comprehensive approach that integrated scientific innovation with strategic planning, economic revitalization, and democratic oversight. Reinhardt argued that the lessons of the war demanded a military establishment rooted not in authoritarianism, but in transparency, adaptability, and collaboration with civilian institutions. This vision aligned with the broader Western commitment to democratic values in the face of Soviet expansionism. Reinhardt's influence was evident in the growing bilateral cooperation between West Germany and the United States, particularly in scientific research and defense technology. Programs facilitating knowledge exchange, joint development of new weaponry, and coordinated military training reflected the practical application of his ideals. The general's experiences and reflections provided a framework for this partnership, emphasizing mutual trust and shared commitment to innovation. Within the Bundeswehr, Reinhardt's ideas helped shape doctrines that embrace technological superiority as fundamental to national security. His emphasis on integrating cutting-edge research with flexible strategic concepts informed training curricula and procurement policies. The new German military sought to avoid the rigidity that had hampered the Wehrmacht, instead fostering a culture receptive to continuous improvement and technological adaptation. Reinhardt's personal journey, from denial and defeat to acceptance and advocacy, became emblematic of Germany's broader post-war transformation. His writings and participation in military and policy forums highlighted the critical importance of confronting past failures honestly while embracing the future with openness and resolve. This narrative of redemption and progress resonated not only within Germany, but across the Western Alliance. The general's reflections also contributed to discussions on the ethical dimensions of military power. He underscored that technological advancement carried with it responsibilities, democratic accountability, respect for human rights, and a commitment to peace. Reinhardt's perspective helped frame debates on the role of the military in a democratic society, advocating for safeguards that would prevent a return to militarism and authoritarianism. As West Germany navigated the complex geopolitics of the Cold War, Reinhardt's insights offered guidance on balancing technological advancement with diplomatic engagement. He recognized that military strength alone was insufficient without integration into a cooperative international framework. His writings emphasized the necessity of alliances, particularly NATO, as platforms for collective security grounded in shared values and technological collaboration. Reinhardt's legacy extended into the industrial realm as well. He championed policies that encouraged innovation through public-private partnerships, investment in research institutions, and the cultivation of a skilled workforce. These efforts contributed to West Germany's rapid economic recovery and technological competitiveness, underpinning its emergence as an industrial powerhouse. Throughout his post-war career, Reinhardt remained mindful of the lessons etched by defeat and captivity. His memoirs and public engagements repeatedly stressed that the true measure of a nation's strength lay not only in its military capabilities, but in its capacity for self-reflection, adaptation, and the pursuit of progress within a democratic framework. This holistic view influenced generations of military leaders and policymakers. The general's journey from the final days in Berlin's bunker to the corridors of post-war power illustrated the enduring impact of innovation on history and national destiny. His acceptance of American technological superiority, once a source of personal and national humiliation, became a foundation for renewal and cooperation. Reinhardt's story demonstrated how openness to change and the embrace of democratic principles could transform former enemies into allies. In lectures, advisory roles, and written works, Reinhardt continued to advocate for the integration of technology, strategy, and ethics in shaping military policy. His voice contributed to shaping a Bundeswehr that reflected the lessons of the past while preparing for the challenges of a rapidly evolving global landscape. The general's reflections underscored that innovation was not merely a tool of war but a catalyst for peace and stability. General Klaus Reinhardt's memoirs and legacy came to symbolize a pivotal chapter in 20th century history, a testament to the decisive role of technology in modern warfare and the transformative power of embracing change. His journey from denial to acceptance, from defeat to leadership and renewal, mirrored the broader trajectory of Germany and the Western world as they confronted the shadows of conflict and forged a new order grounded in innovation, democracy, and cooperation.